Rich man hops into a cab and instantly regrets it when he sees who's behind the wheel. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready, let's start. The crystal chandeliers of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom cast their golden light across a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Jonathan Walker stood at its edge, swirling the remains of his scotch, his expression a carefully crafted mask of polite disinterest. Another charity gala, another evening of performative philanthropy. He'd written a check for 7 figures, enough to ensure his place in tomorrow's society pages, but his mind was already drifting to the Anderson deal he needed to close by week's end. Jonathan, there you are. Regina Blackwood, the evening's host, touched his arm with manicured fingers. I simply must introduce you to the governor's wife. She's fascinated by your downtown revitalization project. He managed a practiced smile. Of course, Regina. The words felt hollow in his mouth, like everything else these days. At 42, Jonathan Walker had built Walker Real Estate into a billion-dollar empire, but lately the victories felt emptier, the achievements more meaningless. The night dragged on, a blur of faces and conversations he'd forget by morning. When his phone buzzed with a message from his driver, stuck in midtown traffic, Jonathan made his decision. He needed air, needed escape. Without saying goodbye, a privilege his wealth afforded him, he slipped out into the cool October night. The doorman moved to call him a car, but Jonathan waved him off. A yellow cab was pulling up to the curb, and for once in his rigorously controlled life, spontaneity beckoned. He reached for the door handle, the expensive wool of his Tom Ford tuxedo brushing against the taxi's worn exterior. Upper East Side, 82nd and Park, he said, sliding into the back seat. The interior smelled of pine air freshener and the lingering ghost of takeout food. Such a far cry from his usual pristine town car. Sure thing, that voice, 3 syllables, and Jonathan's carefully constructed world tilted on its axis. He looked up, meeting familiar brown eyes in the rearview mirror, eyes he hadn't seen in 15 years but had never truly forgotten. They were harder now, lined with experience, but unmistakably belonged to Vanessa Williams. The air left his lungs. Time seemed to freeze, trapped in that moment of recognition. Vanessa's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, the only indication she'd recognized him too. She looked different, older, of course, but also weathered, as if life had carved away the soft edges of the young woman he'd known. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with the occasional silver strand, but she was still beautiful, hauntingly so. Vanessa. His voice cracked on her name. She met his gaze again in the mirror, and the cold fury he saw there made him flinch. Destination, she repeated, her tone professionally distant, as if he were any other fare on any other night. We need to talk. No, we don't. She pulled away from the curb, merging into the late-night traffic. I'm working. You wanted 82nd and Park. Jonathan's mind raced. 15 years of questions, of buried regret, surfaced in an instant. The last time he'd seen her was in their shared apartment, her tears falling as he chose his ambition over their love. He'd told himself it was for the best, that she deserved someone who could put her first, that his dreams of building an empire wouldn't leave room for the simple life she wanted. Now here she was, driving a taxi through the city he'd helped reshape with his buildings and developments. The irony was bitter enough to choke on. How long? He asked, unable to stop himself. How long have you been driving? That's not your business. Her voice was controlled, but he could hear the tension underneath. Just like I haven't been your business for 15 years. The taxi stopped at a red light, and in the brief stillness, Jonathan noticed more details. The small crystal pendant hanging from her rearview mirror. She'd always loved crystals, believing they held healing energy. The worn leather jacket draped over the passenger seat, so different from her once-favored sundresses. A coffee cup holder filled with pens and what looked like homework papers. I've thought about you, he said softly, the words escaping before he could stop them. Often, The light turned green. Vanessa accelerated perhaps a bit too sharply. "Don't," she warned. "Don't you dare try to—" She trailed off, but Jonathan knew what she meant. Don't try to make amends. Don't try to explain. Don't try to disturb the life she'd built without him. They rode in tense silence, the city lights painting patterns across their faces. Jonathan wanted to say more, needed to say more, but the words wouldn't come. How do you apologize for 15 years of absence? How do you explain that success feels like ashes in your mouth when you've sacrificed true love to achieve it? All too soon, they turned onto Park Avenue. The familiar facade of his building loomed ahead, Dorman already stepping forward at the sight of his approaching vehicle. "That'll be 2850, Vanessa said, as they pulled to a stop, her voice professionally detached once more. Jonathan reached for his wallet, movements automatic. "Vanessa, please, can we—" "No!" She finally turned to face him fully, and the raw pain in her expression made him fall silent. "We can't. Goodbye, Jonathan." He placed $50 on the divider, fingers trembling slightly. "Keep the change. I don't want your charity." But she didn't return the money. Jonathan stepped out onto the sidewalk, his legs unsteady. Before he could close the door, before he could find the right words to make her stay, Vanessa pulled away from the curb, disappearing into the flow of traffic. He stood there, watching until her taillights vanished around a corner. The night air felt colder now, or maybe that was just the ice forming around his heart again. But this time, it wasn't the comfortable numbness he'd grown accustomed to. This was sharp, painful, alive with regret and possibility. For the first time in 15 years, Jonathan Walker felt truly awake, and he knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that he couldn't let her disappear again. Vanessa's hands didn't stop shaking until she pulled into the taxi depot 3 hours later. She'd driven through the rest of her shift on autopilot, barely registering the faces of other passengers. Her mind stuck in an endless loop of that moment. Jonathan Walker sliding into her back seat like a ghost from her past. The night shift manager, Bobby, noticed something was off as she handed in her papers. "You okay, Williams? Looking a bit pale there." "I'm fine," she said, forcing a smile. "Just tired. Long night." Bobby nodded, though his concerned expression didn't fade. In the 4 years she'd been driving for the company, he'd become something of a father figure, especially after her own dad passed away. "Get some rest. Ava's got that science fair tomorrow, right?" The mention of her daughter centered her, as it always did. "Yeah, she's been practicing her presentation all week." The drive home to Queens took 20 minutes, each one spent fighting the urge to scream or cry or both. 15 years of carefully constructed walls, and Jonathan had managed to crack them with just one look. She hated that he still had that power over her. The small 2-bedroom apartment was dark when she entered, save for the soft glow of the kitchen nightlight. Mrs. Chen from next door, who watched Ava during Vanessa's night shifts, was dozing in the armchair. She stirred at Vanessa's entrance. "Ah, you're home," the elderly woman whispered, gathering her shawl. "Ava finished all her homework. Such a good girl." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I don't know what I'd do without you." After seeing her neighbor out, Vanessa crept to Ava's room. Her daughter lay sprawled across her bed, dark curls fanned out on the pillow, one arm draped protectively over her science project notebook. At 14, she was all long limbs and potential, brilliant and determined in a way that sometimes made Vanessa's heart ache. Because in those moments of fierce concentration, Ava looked just like her father. Vanessa adjusted the blanket over her daughter, fingers lingering on the star-patterned fabric she'd had since she was small. How many nights had she sat in this room, watching Ava sleep, wondering if she'd made the right choice in never telling Jonathan? The question felt heavier now, weighted with the reality of his sudden reappearance. In the kitchen, she made herself chamomile tea, a habit she'd picked up during pregnancy. The familiar ritual usually calmed her, but tonight her thoughts wouldn't settle. She found herself pulling out the old wooden box from the highest kitchen shelf, the one that held the few mementos she'd kept from her life with Jonathan. The photos were worn at the edges from the few times she'd allowed herself to look at them. Jonathan and her at Central Park, his arm around her waist, both laughing at something now forgotten, another from the small gallery where she'd worked. Him surprising her with flowers after her first successful show. She'd been an artist then, full of dreams about opening her own gallery someday, young and naive enough to believe love could conquer anything. At the bottom of the box lay the ultrasound picture, Ava's first photo. She'd gotten it 2 weeks after Jonathan left, the black and white image confirming what she'd already suspected. She remembered sitting in that sterile doctor's office, alone, listening to the strong heartbeat of their child while tears streamed down her face. She'd tried to tell him, called his office multiple times, but his new secretary always said he was in meetings. After the 3rd week of attempts, she'd seen his engagement announcement in the society pages. A strategic marriage to a real estate heiress that would help launch his empire. The marriage had fallen through, she'd later learned, but by then she'd made her decision. Her child wouldn't be an inconvenience to a man who'd chosen wealth over love. The sound of shuffling feet pulled her from her memories. Ava stood in the kitchen doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Mom, you okay?" Vanessa quickly wiped her cheeks, unaware she'd been crying. "Of course, baby. Just tired. Why are you up?" "Heard you come in." Ava moved to the table, her observant gaze taking in the open box, the scattered photos. Is that him? My father?" The question caught Vanessa off guard. They rarely talked about Jonathan. Ava had stopped asking about him years ago, accepting the vague explanations about him not being ready for a family. But now, yes, Vanessa admitted softly. "That's him." Ava picked up one of the photos, studying it intently. "He looks happy, you both do." "We were once." "What happened tonight, Mom? Something's wrong." "I can tell." Sometimes Vanessa forgot how perceptive her daughter was. So much like Jonathan in that way too, able to read people, to see beneath the surface. She took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't hide this. Not when there was a chance they might run into him again. "I saw him tonight. In my taxi." Ava's eyes widened. "Did he recognize you?" "Yes." "Did you tell him about me?" "No." Vanessa reached for her daughter's hand. "But maybe it's time I did." The words surprised her even as she said them. But seeing Jonathan again had stirred something loose inside her. Not just old pain, but old truths that maybe needed to finally see light. "He's still here in the city," she continued carefully. "He's become very successful." "I know," Ava said quietly. At Vanessa's surprised look, she added, "I Googled him once. Walker Real Estate is pretty famous. There were lots of articles." Of course she had. Ava had inherited her father's thoroughness, along with his sharp mind. "Are you angry? I never told him about you." Ava was silent for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. "I used to be. But then I figured you must have had your reasons." She squeezed Vanessa's hand. "Do you think he'll try to find you again?" The question hit too close to the fear that had been gnawing at Vanessa since she'd driven away from Park Avenue. Because she knew Jonathan Walker, knew his determination, his inability to let go of something once it caught his interest, and the way he'd looked at her tonight. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "But if he does, we'll handle it together." "Okay?" Ava nodded, but Vanessa could see the questions burning in her eyes, the natural curiosity about the father she'd never known. It made her wonder if she'd been selfish all these years, letting her own hurt feelings deny her daughter the chance to know her father. "Come on," she said, standing. "Back to bed? You've got a big day tomorrow." Later, lying in her own bed, Vanessa stared at the ceiling fan slowly turning above her. The night's events played on repeat in her mind. Jonathan's shocked expression, the tremor in his voice when he said her name, the wealth of unspoken words that had hung between them in that taxi. 15 years ago, she'd been the one left behind, watching him choose his ambitions over their love. Now she held the power to shake his world apart with 3 simple words: "You have a daughter." The question was, did she have the courage to say them? And more importantly, did Jonathan Walker deserve the chance to know the amazing young woman their daughter had become? Sleep eluded her as the first hints of dawn began to color the Queen's skyline, bringing with it the weight of decisions she'd thought she'd never have to make. Jonathan hadn't slept. His penthouse, usually a testament to his success with its floor-to-ceiling windows and carefully curated artwork, felt suffocating. He stood at the window, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan's skyline in shades of gold and rose, his third cup of coffee growing cold beside him. "Mr. Walker," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 8 a.m. is here." He pressed the button. "Cancel everything today, Diana." "Sir?" The surprise in her voice was warranted. In 15 years, he'd never cancelled a full day of meetings. "The Anderson deal can wait." He released the button, cutting off her response. His phone had been buzzing all morning. Calls from his lawyer, his project managers, even Regina Blackwood, probably wondering about his abrupt departure from the gala. He ignored them all, his mind fixed on a single goal, finding Vanessa again. The irony wasn't lost on him. 15 years ago, he'd been the one walking away, convinced that his ambitions couldn't coexist with their relationship. Now, here he was, the billionaire CEO of Walker Real Estate, and none of his success could fill the void her absence had left. He moved to his home office, opening his laptop. The search was surprisingly difficult. He hadn't even known her married name, if she had one. Vanessa Williams, New York taxi driver, yielded thousands of useless results. He tried narrowing it down, adding details he remembered from their past, but nothing concrete emerged. Frustrated, he picked up his phone. "Diana, I need you to contact every taxi company in Manhattan. Find out if they have a driver named Vanessa Williams." "Of course, sir. Any particular reason? Personal matter?" His tone made it clear no further questions would be welcomed. While Diana worked on that, Jonathan found himself doing something he hadn't done in years, looking at old photos. They were buried deep in a password-protected folder, digital memories he couldn't bring himself to delete. Vanessa painting in their old apartment, her face flecked with colors. The two of them at Coney Island, her head thrown back in laughter. He touched the screen, tracing the outline of her smile. The intercom buzzed again. "Sir, I've found something. Vanessa Williams works for Liberty Taxi Company in Queens. She's been with them for 4 years. Jonathan's heart raced. "Get me the address." "Sir, they won't release personal information, but I have the company's location, and—" Diana hesitated. The night dispatcher mentioned she usually works the evening shift. "Thank you, Diana." He paused. "But take the rest of the day off." He changed into his most casual clothes, which for him meant tailored slacks and a cashmere sweater, and headed for the garage. His Ferrari would attract too much attention in Queens. Instead, he took the Range Rover, the one he kept for client-site visits. Liberty Taxi's dispatch office was a weathered building in Long Island City, its faded yellow sign barely visible in the mid-morning sun. Jonathan parked across the street, feeling oddly nervous. What was his plan here? To ambush her at work? A heavy-set man in his 60s emerged from the building, lighting a cigarette. His name tag read, Bobby. Jonathan approached him, adopting the casual confidence that had served him well in countless business deals. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Vanessa Williams." Bobby's expression shifted from friendly to guarded. "She's not working right now. I'm an old friend. It's important that I speak with her." "Yeah." Bobby studied him, taking in the expensive clothes and watch. "You look like the type of old friend she doesn't need." Jonathan bristled at the implied criticism, but forced himself to remain calm. "Please, I just need 5 minutes. Listen, Mr. Walker, Jonathan Walker." Recognition flashed in Bobby's eyes, followed by something harder. "Ah, that explains a lot." He crushed his cigarette under his heel. "She's a good person, Walker. One of my best drivers. Whatever you're looking to stir up, leave it alone." "I'm not trying to hurt her," Jonathan said, his carefully constructed facade cracking. "I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I just want a chance to—" "To what? Make it right?" Bobby shook his head. Some things can't be fixed with money or fancy words. She's built a life here, a good one. The man's protective attitude spoke volumes about Vanessa's character, about the relationship she'd built. While Jonathan had been accumulating wealth and power, she'd been cultivating something perhaps more valuable, genuine connections with people who cared about her. Could you at least give her a message? Jonathan pulled out one of his business cards, scribbling his personal number on the back. Please. Bobby took the card reluctantly. I'll give it to her, but it's her choice whether to use it. Thank you. Jonathan turned to leave, then stopped. Is she happy? She's strong. Bobby answered after a moment. Built a good life despite some hard knocks. That's all you need to know. The response wasn't quite an answer, but it painted a picture. Vanessa had faced challenges Jonathan hadn't been there to help with. The knowledge sat like lead in his stomach. Back in his car, Jonathan stared at the taxi company's building. He'd come here hoping, what? That he could sweep in with his wealth and influence and somehow make things right. Bobby's words echoed in his mind. Some things can't be fixed with money. His phone buzzed. Diana, probably with updates about the Anderson deal. The real estate empire he'd sacrificed everything for demanded his attention. But for the first time in 15 years, Jonathan Walker questioned whether he'd built his life on the wrong foundation. He started the car but didn't immediately drive away. Instead, he watched the taxi drivers coming and going, each one carrying stories he'd never considered before. How many times had he dismissed service workers as beneath his notice? How many times had he acted like the arrogant man Vanessa had seen in her rearview mirror last night? A yellow taxi pulled into the lot, and for a moment his heart jumped. But it wasn't her. Of course not. Bobby had said she wasn't working. Jonathan finally pulled away from the curb, his mind racing. He'd built his career by identifying problems and creating solutions, usually through strategic application of money and influence. But this would require something else, something he wasn't sure he still knew how to give. If Vanessa called, and that was a big if, he couldn't approach this like a business deal to be won. He'd have to remember how to be the man she'd once loved. The question was, did that man still exist beneath the polished exterior of Jonathan Walker, CEO? As he drove back to Manhattan, the morning traffic gave him time to think. He'd told himself for 15 years that leaving Vanessa had been the right choice, that she deserved someone who could put her first, and he'd been too focused on his ambitions. But sitting in his expensive car, surrounded by the trappings of the success he'd chosen over love, Jonathan finally admitted the truth. He hadn't left to protect her. He'd left because he'd been afraid of vulnerability, afraid of choosing love over ambition, afraid of becoming his father who'd lost everything chasing dreams instead of security. Now, at 42, he had all the security money could buy, and it meant nothing compared to the look in Vanessa's eyes when she'd told him goodbye. Back in his penthouse, Jonathan walked past his home office with its wall of achievements and awards. Instead, he went to his bedroom and opened the safe hidden behind an abstract painting. Inside, beneath documents and jewelry, lay a small velvet box he hadn't looked at in 15 years. The engagement ring he'd never given her caught the light, its diamond throwing rainbows on the wall. He'd bought it 2 days before his mentor had offered him the deal that would launch his empire, the deal that had required him to appear unattached and had set him on the path away from Vanessa. He closed the box with a snap. Maybe Bobby was right. Some things couldn't be fixed, but Jonathan Walker hadn't built an empire by accepting defeat, and he wasn't about to start now. The question was, would Vanessa give him the chance to prove it? The school gymnasium buzzed with excitement as parents and students milled around the science fair displays. Vanessa stood at the back, trying to focus on Ava's upcoming presentation, instead of the business card burning a hole in her pocket. Bobby had given it to her that afternoon, his expression troubled as he explained Jonathan's visit. "Mom!" Ava waved from her display, drawing Vanessa's attention back to the present. Her project, Urban Air Quality, a neighborhood study, dominated the table with its professional-looking graphs and careful analysis. The judges are coming soon. How do I look? Perfect, Vanessa said, adjusting Ava's collar. Her daughter wore her lucky blazer, a thrift store find they'd tailored together, over a simple blue dress. With her dark curls pulled back and her father's determined expression, she looked older than 14. I really think I have a shot at first place, Ava said, straightening her display board for the 100th time. Did you see the control group data? Mr. Peterson says my methodology was college level. Vanessa smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm, even as her heart ached. Ava had inherited Jonathan's drive for excellence, his analytical mind, his way of seeing problems as puzzles to be solved. She'd done the entire project herself, spending weeks taking air quality readings around their neighborhood, analyzing the data and drawing connections between traffic patterns and pollution levels. The judges approached, 3 science teachers and a guest judge from the local university. Ava straightened her shoulders, slipping into what Vanessa called her presentation mode. She watched her daughter explain her findings with perfect clarity, fielding questions with confidence, her hands moving expressively as she described her conclusions. "Remarkable work," the university professor said when Ava finished. "Have you considered applying to our summer science program? It's usually for high school juniors, but exceptions can be made for exceptional students." Ava's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be amazing." Vanessa's stomach tightened. The summer program would be a fantastic opportunity, but the tuition... She pushed the thought aside. They'd figure something out, they always did. After the judges moved on, several parents stopped to congratulate Ava. One mother, wearing designer clothes that probably cost more than Vanessa's monthly rent, lingered. "Such impressive work," she said, studying the display. "You must be so proud." "I am," Vanessa replied. "We should get her together with my son Bradley. He's in the robotics club at Dalton." The woman's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Although I suppose the commute might be difficult from—" "Where did you say you lived?" "We didn't," Vanessa said coolly, recognizing the familiar mix of condescension and pity. "Excuse us." She'd dealt with women like this before, parents who saw Ava's intelligence and poise and couldn't quite reconcile it with her circumstances, who assumed that because they lived in Queens and Vanessa drove a taxi, they were somehow less than, just like Jonathan probably would. The thought hit her hard. She touched the business card in her pocket again. Should she call him, tell him about the brilliant daughter he'd never known? Would he sweep in with his billions and try to give Ava everything Vanessa couldn't? "Mom," Ava's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You okay? You've got that worried look again?" "I'm fine, sweetheart. Just thinking. About him." Sometimes Vanessa forgot how perceptive her daughter was. "Yes." Ava was quiet for a moment, fiddling with one of her graphs. "You know, it's okay if you want to tell him about me. I've been thinking about it, and I think I'd like to meet him, just to know. It's complicated, Ava." "Life's complicated," Ava said with a shrug that tried too hard to be casual. "But that doesn't mean we should avoid things just because they're hard. Isn't that what you always tell me?" Vanessa stared at her daughter, wondering when she'd gotten so wise. Before she could respond, the principal stepped up to the microphone to announce the winners. Third place goes to Bradley Thompson for his study on renewable energy. The designer-clad mother from earlier applauded loudly as her son accepted his ribbon. Second place, James Chen, for his work on local ecosystem adaptation. Ava squeezed Vanessa's hand, holding her breath. And first place, with an exceptional study of urban air quality and its implications for public health, Ava Williams. The gymnasium erupted in applause. Ava hugged Vanessa tightly before walking to the stage, her head held high. Vanessa filmed with her phone as the principal handed Ava the blue ribbon and a certificate, tears blurring her vision. "Additionally," the principal continued, "I'm pleased to announce that this year's winner will receive a full scholarship to the university's summer science program, generously donated by our guest judge." Vanessa's heart soared as Ava's face lit up with pure joy. Her daughter had done it, had created an opportunity for herself through sheer talent and determination. just like her father had, once upon a time. Later that night, after celebration ice cream and tucking an exhausted but happy Ava into bed, Vanessa sat at her small kitchen table with Jonathan's business card in front of her. Her daughter's words echoed in her mind. That doesn't mean we should avoid things just because they're hard. She thought about Ava's project, how she'd tackled a complex problem by breaking it down into manageable pieces, gathering data and drawing careful conclusions. So much like Jonathan's methodical approach to challenges, her finger traced the embossed letters of his name, remembering the young man who'd once spent hours explaining his dreams to her, mapping out his future on napkins in their favorite diner. He'd been driven but kind then, ambitious but still human. The man in her taxi had seemed harder, colder. But there had been moments, brief flashes in his eyes, tremors in his voice, when she'd seen echoes of the Jonathan she'd loved. Ava deserved to know her father, and maybe, just maybe, Jonathan deserved to know the amazing person their daughter had become. Before she could change her mind, Vanessa picked up her phone and typed out a simple message. We need to talk, not about us, about something more important. Coffee tomorrow. Her finger hovered over the send button for a long moment. Finally, taking a deep breath, she pressed it. The response came less than a minute later. Name the time and place. I'll be there. Vanessa set her phone down, her hands shaking slightly. Tomorrow would change everything, for better or worse, but Ava was right. Some things were worth doing, even when they were hard, especially when they were hard. The coffee shop in Astoria was nothing like the high-end establishments Jonathan frequented in Manhattan. No fancy espresso machines or artisanal pastries, just honest coffee and worn leather booths that had seen decades of conversations. Vanessa had chosen it deliberately, neutral ground, but on her turf. She arrived early, settling into a corner booth with a clear view of the door, her hands wrapped around a mug of black coffee, trying to absorb its warmth. The morning was cold for October, or maybe that was just her nerves. When Jonathan walked in at exactly 9 a.m., the other patrons barely glanced up. His attempt at dressing down, a charcoal sweater and dark jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent, still marked him as out of place, but less obviously than his usual suits would have. Their eyes met across the shop. For a moment, neither moved. Then Jonathan approached, his usual confident stride, slightly hesitant. "And thank you for meeting me," he said, sliding into the booth. "Would you like to order first?" Vanessa asked, more to delay the inevitable than out of courtesy. He shook his head. "I'm fine." His gaze was intense, searching her face. "Your message said this wasn't about us. But Vanessa, I need to say, don't." She pulled out her phone, fingers trembling slightly as she opened her photo gallery. "Before you say anything else, there's something you need to see." She slid the phone across the table. On the screen was a photo from yesterday, Ava at the science fair, proudly holding her first-place ribbon, her smile radiant and achingly familiar. Jonathan stared at the image, confusion evident on his face. Then his expression shifted, recognition dawning as he saw his own features reflected in the teenage girl's face. His hand, reaching for the phone, froze mid-motion. "This is—" His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "How old?" 14. Vanessa forced herself to meet his gaze. "Her name is Ava." All the color drained from Jonathan's face. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles white. 14 years! You were— "I found out 2 weeks after you left. Why didn't you tell me?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "And I tried." The old pain surfaced, but Vanessa kept her voice steady. "I called your office for weeks. Your new secretary said you were always in meetings. Then I saw the engagement announcement in the paper." "The merger engagement!" Jonathan closed his eyes, realization dawning. "The one that fell through after 3 months. God, Vanessa, if I'd known. Would it have made a difference?" The question that had haunted her for 14 years finally escaped. "You'd already chosen your path, Jonathan. The path to becoming." She gestured vaguely at him, at the expensive clothes and watch that marked his success. He stared at the phone again, drinking in Ava's features. "Tell me about her, please." Something in his voice, raw desperation mixed with wonder, made Vanessa's rehearsed speech falter. She found herself talking about their daughter, words spilling out almost against her will. She's brilliant, top of her class. She just won first place in the science fair with a project on urban air quality. She wants to be an environmental engineer. A small smile touched her lips. She has your mind for analysis, your drive, but she's also kind, empathetic. She tutors younger kids at the library on weekends. Does she... Jonathan's voice caught. He cleared his throat. Does she know about me? She knows you exist, that you were someone I loved once, who chose a different path. She's Googled you, actually. Vanessa watched his reaction carefully. She knows about your success, but not that I'm her father. No, well, yes. As of 2 days ago, after I saw you, I told her the truth. She deserved to know. Jonathan absorbed this, his expression a complex mix of emotions. And how did she... She wants to meet you. Vanessa wrapped her hands around her coffee mug again, anchoring herself. That's partly why I'm here. She asked to know you. But Jonathan, if we do this, if I let you into her life, I need to know you're serious. She's not a business deal you can walk away from when things get complicated. I would never... He stopped, pain flashing across his face as he realized that's exactly what he'd done 15 years ago. I understand. Tell me what you need from me. Time, Vanessa said firmly. We do this slowly. No grand gestures, no trying to buy her affection. She doesn't need your money, Jonathan. She needs to know if she can trust you. He nodded slowly. And you, can you trust me? I'm trying to. She met his gaze steadily. For her sake. Jonathan reached for the phone again, his fingers hovering over the screen. May I? Vanessa nodded. She watched as he swiped through the photos. Ava at her middle school graduation, building a science project, reading in their small living room. With each image, his expression grew more pained, more aware of all he'd missed. I have a daughter, he whispered, as if saying it aloud might make it more real. A brilliant, beautiful daughter I knew nothing about. He looked up suddenly. What's her full name? Ava Rose Williams. Rose, after your grandmother? The fact that he remembered surprised her. Yes. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 14 years of missed moments hanging between them. Finally, Jonathan spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I want to make this right, Vanessa. Not just throw money at it. I know that's not what either of you needs. I want to know her, to be whatever kind of father she'll let me be. He pushed a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made her heart ache. Tell me how to do this right. Vanessa studied him, looking for traces of the calculating businessman she'd glimpsed in her taxi. Instead, she saw something raw and real. A man facing the biggest challenge of his life. One that all his wealth and influence couldn't solve. She has a debate competition this Saturday, Vanessa said finally, at her school. If you want, you could come watch, just watch, from the audience. Let her get used to the idea of you being there before we arrange a proper meeting. I'll be there. The words came instantly, without hesitation. What time? As they worked out the details, Vanessa noticed Jonathan's hand was shaking slightly as he entered the information into his phone. The mighty CEO of Walker Real Estate, rattled by the prospect of watching a high school debate. Jonathan? She waited until he looked up. She's a good kid, despite everything. She's grown up happy, loved. I need you to know that. His eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. Thank you for raising her. He gestured at the photos still displayed on her phone. For all of it, I know I don't deserve... This isn't about what you deserve, Vanessa cut him off. It's about what Ava deserves. Remember that. She gathered her things, preparing to leave. Jonathan stood as well, still clutching her phone. Oh! He handed it back reluctantly, as if letting go of the photos meant letting go of Ava all over again. Vanessa, wait, just one more thing. He pulled out his wallet, but instead of money, he extracted a small, worn photograph. Would you give this to her? It was a picture of Jonathan at 14, standing proudly next to a science fair project of his own. The similarity to Ava's pose from yesterday was startling. "She gets it from both of us," Vanessa said softly, accepting the photo. "The need to understand how things work, to make them better." Jonathan nodded, unable to speak. As Vanessa turned to leave, his voice stopped her one final time. "I won't let her down, either of you. Not again." She didn't turn back, but her steps faltered slightly. "Prove it," she said, and walked out into the autumn morning, leaving Jonathan Walker alone with the weight of 14 years of missed moments, and the chance to finally make them right. For the first time in his adult life, Jonathan Walker was early to an event that wasn't a business meeting. He sat in his parked car outside Ava's high school for 20 minutes, watching other parents and students file into the building. The morning sun caught on the brick facade, warming the autumn air, but his hands felt cold on the steering wheel. He'd cancelled a board meeting for this. Diana had nearly fallen out of her chair when he'd marked his entire Saturday as unavailable, something he hadn't done since taking over the company. But as he stared at the school building, even the Anderson deal seemed trivial compared to what awaited inside. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "We're here. Remember, just watching today." Jonathan adjusted his clothes one more time, casual slacks and a navy sweater, carefully chosen to blend in before heading inside. The school's hallways were lined with student artwork and academic achievements. He paused at a display case, noting a familiar name on a plaque, Ava Williams, Regional Science Fair Champion. The debate was being held in the auditorium. Jonathan slipped in quietly, choosing a seat near the back where he could observe without being obvious. The space filled quickly with parents and students, their excited chatter creating a buzz of anticipation. Then he saw them. Vanessa was helping Ava organize note cards at one of the competitor tables, both of them focused on the task. His daughter wore a blazer that looked vintage but well cared for, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Even from a distance, he could see her hands moving expressively as she spoke, just like his mother used to do. "The Queen's Academy Debate Championship will begin in 5 minutes, a voice announced over the PA system. "Competitors, please take your positions." Vanessa hugged Ava, whispering something that made their daughter smile. As she turned to find her seat, her eyes met Jonathan's briefly. She gave him a small nod before sitting several rows ahead. The debate topic was displayed on a screen. Should cities implement congestion pricing to combat urban traffic and pollution? Jonathan couldn't help but smile. Of course, his daughter would excel at a topic involving environmental policy. When Ava stood to give her opening statement, Jonathan's heart nearly stopped. Her posture, the way she commanded attention without seeming to try, the precise gesture of her hands, it was like watching a ghost of his younger self. But there was something else too, a warmth in her delivery that was all Vanessa. "The evidence is clear," Ava began, her voice confident and clear. "Our city's air quality crisis disproportionately affects lower-income neighborhoods. Through my own research, studying pollution levels across different areas," Jonathan leaned forward slightly. She was citing her science fair project, using real data she'd gathered herself to support her arguments. Her analysis was sophisticated, her delivery polished. She didn't just present facts, she wove them into a compelling narrative about environmental justice and community impact. The opposing team presented strong counter-arguments about economic burden and implementation challenges. Ava listened intently, taking notes. When it was her turn for rebuttal, she addressed each point methodically, but with an empathetic touch that surprised him. "While the economic concerns are valid," she acknowledged, "we must consider the hidden costs our current system imposes on vulnerable communities. In my neighborhood," she shared a personal anecdote about a young neighbor with asthma, connecting the policy discussion to real human impact. Jonathan recognized the technique. He'd used similar methods to win over skeptical investors. But where his approach was usually calculated for maximum business advantage, Ava's seemed to come from a place of genuine concern for her community. During a brief break between rounds, he watched her interact with her teammates. She offered encouragement to a nervous-looking boy, helped another girl organize her notes, leadership without dominance, strength without arrogance. She'd learned lessons it had taken him decades to grasp. The final round was intense. Ava's team faced their toughest opponents yet, and the discussion became heated. When a competitor tried to dismiss her data as amateur research, Jonathan tensed, ready to be offended on her behalf. But Ava remained composed, turning the criticism into an advantage. "I may be young," she said calmly, "but I believe that makes my findings more, not less, relevant. If a 14-year-old can document these pollution patterns with basic equipment, imagine what we could learn with proper city resources. The question isn't whether we can afford to implement congestion pricing, it's whether we can afford not to." The auditorium erupted in applause. Even the judges seemed impressed. Jonathan found himself gripping his armrest, pride swelling in his chest for this remarkable young woman who carried his DNA but had grown into someone far wiser than he'd been at her age. When the results were announced, Ava's team taking first place, Jonathan stood with the rest of the audience, clapping until his hands hurt. He watched Vanessa embrace their daughter, saw the joy and pride on both their faces. For a moment, he felt like an intruder, witnessing something precious he hadn't earned the right to share. As the crowd began to disperse, Ava looked up, scanning the audience. Her eyes passed over him once, then returned. Even from a distance, he could see the moment of recognition. She'd seen his photos online, after all. Their gazes locked for a brief second that felt like an eternity. Then one of her teammates called her name, and the moment broke. Ava turned away, accepting congratulations from her friends and teachers. Jonathan remained rooted to his spot, overwhelmed by the complex mix of emotions coursing through him. His phone vibrated. Another text from Vanessa. "She did well." Jonathan stared at the screen, trying to find words adequate for what he'd just witnessed. Finally, he typed, "She's extraordinary. Thank you for letting me see this." He waited until Ava and Vanessa had left with a group of celebrating students before making his way out. In his car, he sat for a long time, replaying every moment of the debate. He'd spent 15 years building an empire, priding himself on his ability to read people and situations. But nothing in his business experience had prepared him for the intensity of watching his daughter shine. Opening his glove compartment, he pulled out the photo Vanessa had shown him at the coffee shop, Ava with her science fair ribbon. Now he could see beyond the surface similarities. In her stance, her expression, he recognized not just his features, but something of his spirit, tempered by Vanessa's compassion. He'd missed 14 years of moments like today, 14 years of debates and science fairs, of small triumphs and everyday challenges. The weight of that loss pressed against his chest, making it hard to breathe. But he'd been there today. He'd seen her in her element, watched her handle pressure with grace, witnessed her intelligence and empathy in action. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but maybe it was a start. His phone buzzed one more time. Vanessa again. "She asked about you after. She'd like to meet properly. Are you ready for that?" Jonathan's hands trembled as he typed his response. "Yes, whenever she's ready, however she wants to do this." He started his car, but instead of heading toward his penthouse, he found himself driving through Ava's neighborhood. The streets she'd studied for her pollution research, the community she'd spoken about defending. He needed to understand this part of her world, to see the reality she'd grown up in. Because for the first time in 15 years, Jonathan Walker was beginning to realize that all his success meant nothing compared to the chance to know his daughter, and this time he was determined not to let fear or ambition stand in his way. They agreed to meet at the Queen's Botanical Garden. Ava had chosen the location, neutral ground with plenty of open space and other people around. Vanessa would be there too, not hovering but within sight, a safety net if needed. Jonathan arrived half an hour early, pacing the paths near the main entrance. He'd picked up and discarded a dozen gift ideas before deciding to come empty-handed. Vanessa's warning echoed in his mind. No grand gestures, no buying affection. He spotted them approaching from the parking lot. Ava wore jeans and a forest green sweater, her curls loose around her shoulders. She walked with Vanessa's fluid grace, but his determined stride. Seeing her up close, in motion, the reality of her existence hit him all over again. They met by the visitor center, the autumn air crisp with fallen leaves. For a moment, no one spoke. "Hi," Ava said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was steady, but Jonathan noticed her fingers fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater, a nervous gesture he recognized from his own childhood. "Hi, Ava." He fought the urge to reach out, to try to bridge 14 years with a hug neither of them was ready for. "Thank you for wanting to meet me." Vanessa touched Ava's shoulder. "I'll be over by the rose garden if you need me." She gave Jonathan a warning look that clearly said, "Don't mess this up," before walking away. "Would you like to walk?" Ava asked, gesturing toward one of the garden paths. They fell into step together, maintaining a careful distance. Jonathan had rehearsed dozens of opening lines, but now they all felt inadequate. "Your debate performance was impressive," he said finally. "The way you handled that challenge about your research methodology, that was really something." "You were watching." A flash of surprise crossed her face. "I thought I saw you, but in the back row. I didn't want to make you nervous." "Were you nervous?" The directness of her question, so like his own approach to difficult conversations, caught him off guard. "Terrified," he admitted honestly. This earned him a small smile. "Me too. About today, I mean." She paused near a Japanese maple, its leaves blazing red against the sky. "I have questions." "I'm sure you do. I'll answer anything you want to know, Ava." Complete honesty. She studied him with an intensity that reminded him of board meetings, of being sized up by potential investors. "Why did you leave?" No preamble, no softening of the blow. He'd known this question was coming, had prepared for it, but the reality of answering his daughter still made his chest tight. "I could tell you it was complicated," he said slowly. "Talk about business opportunities and career trajectories. But the truth is simpler and worse. I was a coward." They reached a stone bench overlooking a small pond. Ava sat, and Jonathan took the other end, respecting her space. "I was 28, he continued, ambitious but struggling. Then I got an opportunity, a chance to join a major development firm. But they wanted someone unattached, someone who could work 100-hour weeks and travel constantly. I convinced myself I was doing your mother a favor by leaving, that she deserved someone who could put her first." He met Ava's steady gaze. "I was wrong, and finding out about you, knowing what I missed. Mom says you tried to contact her this week, at her work." "Yes, after I saw her in the taxi, I couldn't let her disappear again." "And now?" Ava's voice was carefully neutral. "What do you want now?" Jonathan turned to face her fully. "And to know you, if you'll let me, not to make up for lost time. I know I can't do that, but to be part of your life going forward, in whatever way you're comfortable with." "I read about you online," Ava said, "about your company, your success." She picked up a fallen maple leaf, turning it over in her hands. "Did it make you happy? All of it?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "I thought it did. I told myself it did. But seeing your mother again, learning about you, I realized I've been successful but not happy, not really. Mom struggled sometimes," Ava said quietly, "working nights, making ends meet. But we were happy, are happy." She looked at him directly. "I don't need your money." "I know." He fought back the instinct to offer it anyway, to try to solve problems the only way he'd known for 15 years. "Your mother made that very clear. But maybe you'd let me help with your summer science program. Not paying for it," he added quickly, seeing her expression. "But I could help you prepare your application, or—" "I already got in," Ava said, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. Full scholarship. My air quality project impressed them. Of course it did. The pride in his voice matched hers. You're brilliant, Ava. I saw that at the debate. The way you think, the way you put arguments together. He hesitated. You remind me of myself at your age, except you're better, kinder, wiser. Mom says I get my analytical mind from you, but my heart from her. She's right. Jonathan watched a family of ducks glide across the pond. I used to be different, you know. Before business consumed me, I cared about making things better, not just making money. Your environmental work, your concern for your community, it reminded me of that. Ava was quiet for a moment, still playing with the maple leaf. I have your photo, she said finally. The one from your science fair. Mom gave it to me. I won first place that day, Jonathan remembered, for a project about water filtration systems. Really? Interest flickered in Ava's eyes. I've been reading about innovative water purification methods for developing nations. There's this new technology using graphene. For the next 20 minutes, they talked science. Jonathan found himself drawn into a deep discussion about environmental engineering, surprised and delighted by Ava's knowledge and insights. When she smiled, genuinely excited about a particular concept, he saw Vanessa's warmth light up his own features. I have more questions, she said eventually. About you, about why you never tried to find Mom after the fake engagement ended, about a lot of things. I'm here, Jonathan said simply, for all of it, and you'll stay, even when it's hard. The fear in her voice, carefully hidden but still there, cut through him. This brilliant, accomplished young woman was still a 14-year-old girl afraid of being abandoned again. Ava. He turned to face her fully. And I've made exactly one good decision since seeing your mother's face in that rearview mirror, choosing to be honest with you right now. I can't change the past, can't make up for missing your first steps or first words or first science fair, but I swear to you, on everything I am, that I will not walk away again. She studied him for a long moment, and he fought the urge to look away from her scrutiny. Finally, she nodded slightly. Okay. She stood up, brushing off her jeans. Mom probably thinks you've kidnapped me by now. We should head back. Of course. Jonathan stood as well, suddenly awkward again. Thank you for today, for giving me a chance. Ava looked up at him, and for a moment he saw uncertainty flicker across her face. Then, with a decisiveness that was purely her own, she stepped forward and gave him a quick, tight hug. The contact lasted only seconds, but Jonathan felt it down to his bones. By the time he recovered enough to respond, she was already stepping back, composing herself. Same time next week, she asked, her voice carefully casual. I could bring my research on water purification systems. I'll be here, Jonathan promised, his voice rough with emotion. As they walked back toward the visitor center where Vanessa waited, Jonathan felt something shift inside him, like a piece of his world clicking back into place. He wasn't a father yet. Not really. That would take time, trust, and more conversations like today. But he had a chance, and this time he wouldn't let fear steal it away. Vanessa watched the autumn leaves spiral down outside her taxi window, waiting for her next fare. Her mind kept drifting back to the scene she'd witnessed at the botanical garden. Jonathan and Ava on the bench, their profiles so similar it made her heart ache. She'd stayed far enough away to give them privacy, but close enough to see their body language shift from awkward tension to cautious connection. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ava. At the library with Maya, working on college prep stuff. Home by 6. These ordinary moments of motherhood had been hers alone for so long. Now she found herself wondering if she should forward these messages to Jonathan, include him in the daily rhythm of their daughter's life. The thought was both terrifying and strangely relieving. A tap on her window startled her. She turned to find Jonathan standing there, looking as surprised to see her as she was to see him. I wasn't looking for you, he said quickly as she lowered the window. I'm meeting with some community leaders about a development project, and I saw your taxi. It's fine. She gestured to the back seat. Need a ride? He hesitated, then walked around and got in. The Vietnamese restaurant on 30 Futhers, please. I'm treating Mrs. Nguyen and her neighborhood association to lunch. Vanessa pulled into traffic, watching him in the rearview mirror. He looked different today. His usual power suit replaced by something more approachable, his posture less rigid. "You're meeting with the Astoria Community Board?" she asked, surprised. "About what?" "I've been researching the area since the debate. Ava's comments about environmental impact on local communities, they made me think." He met her eyes in the mirror. "My company owns several properties here. I want to discuss retrofitting them with green technology, maybe set up a pilot program for sustainable urban development." Vanessa absorbed this. "Because of Ava. Because she helped me remember why I got into development in the first place, before it became about profit margins and shareholder value." He paused. "She's remarkable, Vanessa. You've done an amazing job with her." "We did okay." She navigated around a double-parked car. "She asked about you this morning. Wanted to know if you were always interested in science." "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that you used to spend hours explaining solar power concepts to me on our first dates, that you wanted to change the world before you decided to own it instead." The words came out sharper than intended. She saw Jonathan flinch slightly in the mirror. "I deserved that," he said quietly, "but I'm trying to change. To be someone Ava can be proud to know." They rode in silence for a few blocks. Vanessa thought about their daughter's face after meeting Jonathan, the mix of hope and uncertainty in her eyes. "She wants to show you her water purification research next week," she said finally. "She's been talking about it non-stop." "I'd like that." Jonathan's voice softened. "But Vanessa, we should talk about how to handle this. Schedules, boundaries. I don't want to overstep." She pulled up to a red light, turning to look at him directly. "Do you remember what you said to me the night you left? That you couldn't be the man I needed you to be?" "I remember everything about that night." "Well, now it's not about what I need or what you need. It's about what Ava needs." She faced forward again as the light turned green. "And she needs us to figure out how to be in her life together without making it complicated. Is that possible?" His voice was barely audible. "To keep it uncomplicated." The question hung between them, heavy with 15 years of history. Vanessa thought about the moment she'd seen him comforting Ava at the garden, how her heart had twisted at the familiar gesture of his hand running through his hair when he was nervous. "It has to be," she said firmly. "At least for now." They arrived at the restaurant. Jonathan paid the fare, exactly the posted amount, no extravagant tip this time, but he lingered before getting out. "Would you have dinner with me?" At her sharp look, he added quickly, "To discuss Ava, her schedule, her interests, what I should know about her life. Just help me understand how to be what she needs." Vanessa considered refusing. It would be safer, cleaner. But she remembered Ava's face this morning, bright with excitement, as she talked about showing Jonathan her research. "Tuesday evening," she said finally. "The diner on Broadway. Nothing fancy." "Thank you." He opened the door, then paused. "You know, watching you with her, seeing the life you've built. I was wrong that night. You never needed me to be anything. You were always the strong one." He was gone before she could respond, disappearing into the restaurant where the community leaders waited. Vanessa sat for a moment, hands tight on the steering wheel, fighting the familiar ache in her chest. Her phone buzzed again, another text from Ava. "Can we invite Dad to my winter choir concert? Only if you're okay with it." Dad. The word looked strange on her screen. She thought about Jonathan's face when Ava had hugged him, the raw emotion he couldn't hide, about the way he'd listened to their daughter talk about science, really listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak. "I'll ask him," she typed back. Then, after a moment, "I'm proud of you, baby, for giving him a chance." The response came quickly. "Thanks, Mum, for giving him one too." Vanessa pulled away from the curb, merging back into traffic. The city flowed around her taxi. The same streets she'd driven for years, now somehow different, like a familiar photograph suddenly revealing new details in better light. Her next fare was waiting, an elderly woman heading to her doctor's appointment. As Vanessa helped her with her shopping bags, she thought about what Jonathan had said about changing, about being someone Ava could be proud to know. Maybe they were all changing. Ava, stepping cautiously toward knowing her father. Jonathan, rediscovering the idealistic young man he'd once been, and herself. Maybe she was changing too, learning to share the most precious part of her life with the man who'd once shattered her heart. It wouldn't be easy. The past couldn't be erased, and trust, once broken, grew back slowly like a healing bone. But watching Ava and Jonathan together at the garden, seeing them find common ground in their shared passion for science and problem-solving, Vanessa had felt something she hadn't expected. Hope, not for herself and Jonathan. That chapter was closed, but hope for their daughter, for the relationship she might build with her father. Hope that sometimes, even after 15 years of absence, bridges could be built over the deepest waters. The taxi wound through Queens, busy streets as afternoon settled into evening. Somewhere in the city, Ava was planning her next meeting with Jonathan. Somewhere else, Jonathan was trying to turn their daughter's environmental concerns into real change. And here, in her taxi, Vanessa was learning to navigate this new reality where the past and present collided, where old wounds and new possibilities lived side by side. One fare at a time, one day at a time, one careful step at a time. The Broadway diner looked exactly as Jonathan remembered it. The same neon signs, the same worn leather booths, even the same coffee-stained menus. 15 years ago, he and Vanessa had been regulars here, two young dreamers sharing midnight pancakes and ambitious plans for the future. Now he sat across from her in their old booth, both of them pretending this choice of location wasn't deliberate. Vanessa wore her taxi company jacket over a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. No makeup, no pretense. She'd always been most beautiful this way. Ava's winter concert is December 15th, Vanessa said, getting straight to business. She has a solo in the second half. I'll be there. Jonathan pulled out his phone to mark the date, then hesitated. Unless, would that make things uncomfortable? Having us both there? She wants you there. That's what matters. Vanessa sipped her coffee. Black, 2 sugars, same as always. But we should set some ground rules about all of this. The waitress approached. Claire, who'd worked here since they were regulars. Her eyes widened slightly at seeing them together, but she kept her professional smile. The usual, she asked, then caught herself. I mean, grilled cheese and tomato soup, they said simultaneously, then looked away from each other. Some things don't change, Claire muttered, shuffling away. Vanessa pulled out a small notebook. I made a list. Things you should know about Ava. Her schedule, her allergies. She gets hay fever in spring, nothing serious. Her friends, her activities. Jonathan listened intently as Vanessa detailed their daughter's life. Choir practice on Mondays and Wednesdays. Debate team meetings on Thursdays. Her best friend Maya, whose mother Mrs. Chen watched Ava during Vanessa's night shifts. The library where she tutored younger kids on weekends. She's applying to summer internships besides the science program, Vanessa continued. Environmental non-profits, mostly. She's ambitious, like both of us, Jonathan said quietly. Yes, but Vanessa set down her notebook. She's not just focused on success. She genuinely wants to help people, to make things better. Like you. Jonathan met her eyes. She got the best of both of us. Vanessa, your heart, my drive, and your stubbornness. God help us all. The joke slipped out naturally, an echo of their old banter. Claire arrived with their food, and for a few minutes they ate in silence. Jonathan watched Vanessa dip her grilled cheese in the soup, just as she always had. The familiarity of it made his chest ache. The community board was impressed with your proposal, Vanessa said finally. Mrs. Nguyen told me you actually listened to their concerns, didn't just try to bulldoze through with your plans. I'm learning. He set down his spoon. Ava's research. It made me see things differently. The human cost of development. The way environmental issues affect real people, not just statistics. She has that effect on people. A small smile touched Vanessa's lips. makes them want to be better, like her mother. Vanessa's smile faded. Jonathan, don't. I know we can't go back. He forced himself to maintain eye contact. But I need you to know that leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life. Not just because it meant missing Ava's childhood, but because... Stop. Vanessa's voice was firm. We're here to discuss our daughter, not us. You're right. I'm sorry. He took a breath. Tell me more about the choir concert. They spent the next hour reviewing practical matters, schedules, boundaries, plans for gradually increasing his involvement in Ava's life. Vanessa was organized, methodical, leaving no detail uncovered. One more thing, she said as they finished their meal. About Christmas. I won't intrude on your holiday. Actually, Vanessa fiddled with her napkin. Ava asked if you'd like to come for Christmas Eve dinner. Just dinner, she added quickly. Not the whole day. She wants to show you the family recipes her grandmother taught her. Jonathan's throat tightened. I'd be honored. But Jonathan, Vanessa's expression grew serious. If you do this, if you become part of these moments, you have to stay, no matter what. She's starting to let you in, to hope. If you disappear again, I won't. He reached across the table instinctively, stopping just short of touching her hand. Vanessa, I know I haven't earned your trust, but I swear to you, I will not hurt her again. Either of you. She drew her hand back slowly. We'll see. The check arrived, and they both reached for it. Their fingers brushed briefly, sending an electric current through Jonathan's arm. I've got it, Vanessa said firmly. This isn't a date. I know. He let her take the check, understanding this was about more than money, about independence, about maintaining the boundaries they needed. Outside, the November night was cold and clear. Jonathan's driver waited discreetly down the block, while Vanessa's taxi was parked in front. Thank you, he said, for dinner, for everything. Vanessa paused before opening her car door. You know what Ava said to me yesterday. She said she's glad you're not perfect, that she likes seeing you try to be better, because it means maybe she doesn't have to be perfect either. The words hit him hard. She's wise beyond her years. Yes, she is. Vanessa's expression softened slightly. The science fair photos, the ones of you and her, I'm having them framed for her Christmas present. The parallel paths we could have walked, Jonathan murmured. But didn't. Vanessa's voice was gentle but firm. Good night, Jonathan. He watched her drive away, remembering all the nights he'd done the same in their youth. But this time was different. This time he wasn't walking away from love, but toward something perhaps more important. The chance to be the father Ava deserved. His phone buzzed with a text from their daughter. Mom says Christmas Eve is a yes. I'm making Grandma Rose's lasagna. No fancy gifts. Okay? Just you. Jonathan smiled at the phone, feeling the warmth of possibility despite the cold night air. Just me, he typed back. I promise. Walking to his car, he passed the diner's window. Inside, Claire was wiping down their old booth, erasing the traces of tonight's careful conversation. But something remained, not the ghost of their past love, but the foundation of a new future. One built not on romance or regret, but on the solid ground of their shared love for their daughter. It wasn't the life he'd imagined 15 years ago in that same booth. It was harder, messier, more complicated. But as he slid into his car's leather interior, Jonathan realized it was also more real than anything he'd built in the years between. His empire of glass and steel towers suddenly seemed less impressive compared to the simple miracle of his daughter wanting to cook him Christmas dinner, of Vanessa trusting him enough to allow it, of the chance to prove, one day at a time, that people really could change, if they were brave enough to try. Snow fell softly outside the Williams' apartment window, dusting Queens in a gentle white blanket. Inside, the small kitchen was warm with the aroma of bubbling tomato sauce and fresh herbs. Ava stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, her grandmother's worn recipe card propped carefully on the counter. The secret, she explained to Jonathan, who watched from a respectful distance, is to let the sauce reduce slowly, Grandma Rose always said patience was the most important ingredient. Jonathan nodded, taking in every detail of this moment. His daughter wore a faded apron that had clearly seen years of use, her curls tied back from her face. She moved through the kitchen with confident familiarity, so different from his own stilted attempts at cooking. "Can I help with anything?" he asked. Ava considered this. "You can grate the parmesan, the real kind, not the stuff in the green container." "I brought some," he said, reaching for the bag he'd carried in. "Duh, from that Italian market you mentioned liking. Di Paolo's." Her eyes lit up. "Mom and I save up to shop there for special occasions." From the living room, Vanessa watched their interaction while setting the small table with her good dishes, the ones that had belonged to her mother. The apartment showed signs of careful preparation: fresh flowers in a vase, holiday lights strung along the windows, family photos arranged on the walls, including, Jonathan noticed, the newly framed science fair photos of father and daughter. "The sauce needs stirring," Ava announced. "Want to learn how?" Jonathan approached the stove, accepting the wooden spoon with the gravity of receiving a sacred artifact. Ava guided his hand through the proper motion. "Gentle circles," she instructed. "And watch for bubbles at the edges. That's how you know it's reducing right." The simple domesticity of the moment nearly overwhelmed him. This was what he'd missed. Not just the big moments, but these quiet teachings, these small traditions passed down through generations. "Your grandmother taught you all this?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. "Mom did, actually, but she learned from Grandma Rose." Ava sprinkled more herbs into the sauce. "Mom says cooking is like love. You have to pay attention to the little things, and you can't rush the important parts." From the corner of his eye, Jonathan saw Vanessa pause in her table setting, clearly hearing the echo of her own words in their daughter's voice. The past 2 months had been a careful dance of boundaries and discoveries. Weekly meetings at the botanical garden had evolved into occasional dinners, where they discussed science and environmental policy. He'd attended Ava's choir concert, sitting separately from Vanessa, but joining in her standing ovation after Ava's solo. Small steps, building trust one moment at a time. "Time for the layers," Ava announced, pulling out the pasta sheets. "This is the tricky part. Each layer has to be just right, not too much, not too little." Together, they assembled the lasagna, Ava directing while Jonathan followed her instructions with the focused attention he usually reserved for million-dollar contracts. When she approved his cheese distribution technique, his heart swelled with more pride than any business deal had ever given him. As the lasagna baked, filling the apartment with its rich aroma, they gathered in the living room. Ava had insisted on no elaborate gifts, but she'd allowed them each to bring one meaningful item to exchange. "You first, Dad." The word still gave him goosebumps. He handed Ava a carefully wrapped package, watching as she opened it to reveal a leather-bound journal. "It was my first business diary," he explained, "but I want you to use it for something better. Your environmental research notes, your ideas for making the world better. Because that's what really matters." Ava ran her fingers over the soft leather. "Thank you," she said softly. "My turn." She presented them each with identical wrapped packages. Inside were framed photographs, recent ones from her choir concert. In Vanessa's, Ava was hugging her mother backstage, both of them laughing. In Jonathan's, he and Ava stood by the school's Christmas tree, their matching smiles capturing the tentative joy of new connection. "Mrs. Chen took them," she explained. I thought we could start some new traditions while keeping the old ones." Vanessa blinked back tears, pulling Ava close. After a moment, she extended her other arm slightly, an invitation Jonathan hadn't expected. He joined them carefully, this first shared family hug, both awkward and profound. The oven timer broke the moment. As Ava rushed to rescue her lasagna, Vanessa and Jonathan shared a look of pure gratitude, not for each other, but for the remarkable young woman they'd somehow created between them. Dinner was served on mismatched plates, wine for the adults, and sparkling cider for Ava in her special occasion glass. The lasagna was perfect, layers of flavor built with patience and care. A toast, Ava proposed, raising her glass, to family. The one we were born with, the one we've made, and the one we're still building. To family, they echoed, the words carrying different meanings for each of them. Later, after the dishes were done and leftovers carefully packed, including a portion for Mrs. Chen, they stood at the apartment door saying goodnight. The snow had picked up, transforming the city into something softer, full of possibility. "Drive carefully," Vanessa said, practical as always. "I will," Jonathan turned to Ava. "Thank you for dinner, for everything." "Same time next year?" Ava asked, trying to sound casual, but not quite hiding her hope. "Maybe we could make it a tradition." "I'd like that." He hesitated, then added, "Maybe before next Christmas, we could talk about setting up that environmental research lab you mentioned, the one for testing water purification methods." Ava's eyes lit up. "Really? You mean it? Small scale," Vanessa interjected firmly, "in the community center space, where it can help local students." "Of course," Jonathan agreed quickly. "Whatever works best." Ava hugged him goodbye, these embraces coming easier now, more natural. "Merry Christmas, Dad. Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Outside, the snow muffled the city's usual noise. Jonathan looked back at the apartment window where Ava waved, Vanessa's hand on her shoulder. Light spilled out around them, warm against the winter night. He thought about the man he'd been 15 years ago, walking away from love in pursuit of success. That man could never have imagined this moment, standing in the snow in Queens, his heart full of a different kind of richness. His phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "The lab thing? Really? Really?" he typed back. "Dreams worth having are worth building properly. Your mom taught me that." He walked to his waiting car, leaving footprints in the fresh snow. Behind him, the apartment building stood solid and real, containing the family he'd lost and found, and was slowly, carefully learning to be part of again. Not all broken things could be fixed, but some could be rebuilt, different but stronger, if you had the courage to try. If you learned to measure success not in dollars or deals, but in moments like tonight, in shared meals and careful hugs and the way your daughter's eyes lit up when she talked about changing the world. The snow fell steadily, covering his footprints, ready for new paths to be made tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that, the end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.